Hello and welcome to another Confessions podcast. This week, a concise collection for you. More terrible tales. The psycho shower scene, a pool's palaver, and a catastrophic, yet amusing, bovine blunder. I know, shocking. Just the three, because it's bank holiday. Anyway, brief but pretty gorgeous. Here it is. Time for another confession. Thank you very much, Steve, for all the confessions going into our website, bbc.co.uk/radio2. You look for the drive time pages. Everything is straightforward from there. This from Tim. Thank you, Tim. Dear Simon and the collective, I would like to confess to an indiscretion that happened some 21 years ago in the hope of your forgiveness. And by the way, welcome back, Mother Superior.
Do you have anything to confess to me, Simon, that you've done in the last week, which I can deal with?
Absolutely nothing at all. Just this from Tim. At the time, I was a single lad around town, still living at home with my parents. I'd been out on the town and ended up in a nightclub where I had success with attracting a lady. I asked if she'd like to come back to mine, as the night was still young. She agreed to this, and a taxi was caught. When we arrived at my home, I announced to my in-bed parents that I had brought Jane home for a coffee. My parents had met a Jane previously, but this had long ended. Clearly, Jane is just a generic term for any women come back with Tim. Anyway, Tim continues, the lady's name now escapes me, but it wasn't Jane. Please don't pass judgment on me yet. I think you might be out of luck there. We were just having a chat and getting to know each other when the lady in question said she had to use the loo. As it had been at least an hour since we'd arrived home, I figured that my parents would be fast asleep and that this would be fine. I asked the lady to be very quiet, and my parents had a little dog who would fuss if disturbed as she slept in my parents' room. I also said to leave the lights off, as this would also wake everyone. I'm sure she was having a great time. I'd been waiting downstairs for about 15 minutes, wondering what had taken so long, when I heard a blood-curdling scream that woke up the whole house. And it was a scream from my mother. Now, as a child growing up, I was called by three names: Tim, for everyday use; Timmy, used only when I was in trouble; and Timothy, used on Sundays and when we had company. Great to have a different name for Sundays. Timmy! My mother shouted downstairs in a manly voice. You have 2 minutes to get this woman out of my house. I shouted up, OK. The lady in question came downstairs looking very flushed and embarrassed. I decided that we'd better leave very quickly. We left and ended up back at this lady's house. In hindsight, we should have gone there first. Hardly a word was said in the taxi to her house. When we got into her house, I asked what exactly had happened upstairs at mine. She said she'd gone upstairs and, as I had asked her to, not turned on the lights and closed the bathroom door quietly behind her. She was about to use the toilet when she heard someone get up and try to come into the bathroom. So in panic, had stood in the bath that had a half shower screen and a curtain, hoping this would be enough to avoid being seen. My mother had entered the bathroom in a half-asleep state to use the toilet. She turned the light on, sat on the loo and looked up. What she saw was a silhouetted figure crouched and, she presumed, ready to pounce just the other side of the curtain. Jane was actually cowering too, as she was terrified of my mother. Images of the shower scene in Psycho sprang to her mind. But it must have looked as though Jane was coiled and ready to jump. For a few seconds my mother froze, and then Jane reached out to open the curtain. This was the cause of my mother's scream. Jane then apparently said, Hello, I'm Jane, how do you do? Nice manners at least, but it was far too late to impress my mother. She wasn't too narrow-minded, but she did draw the line at strangers hiding in her bathroom when she wanted to use the toilet. As indeed, I think, would we all. I would like to seek forgiveness for scaring my mother nearly half to death, and for waking the whole house as my mother's scream set the dog off, who woke my father. The whole street was woken as well. I was given a stern lecture by my father the next day about the kind of girls I invited back. No bath crouchers was his stern rebuke, and was in my mother's bad books for several days afterwards. I would also like to ask forgiveness from the lady involved, who probably never forgot that night, although clearly you've forgotten what her name was. So all is even. P.S. I got my own house shortly after this, and probably a good thing too. Tim, thank you very much indeed. An impressive story, a scary silhouette. Feel sorry for Tim's mother for a number of reasons. What do you say, Sister Pauline?
That's so weird. is this one of these households that don't have locks on the bathroom doors? In which case, I blame his parents for not installing the lock. So, entirely forgiven. I think it's not his fault. The woman was obviously drunk or stupid. Or who crouches in the bath? That's just weird behaviour.
Well, if you're trying to, who sits down on the loo? Ask Jeremy Vine. Who crouches behind the shower curtain? Well, if you're scared of psycho mother coming in.
Yeah, she should have just either locked the door or made some sort of I'm afraid the woman is in the wrong. Poor old Timmy was an innocent bystander in what was obviously a debacle from start to finish. Put a lock on the bathroom door, people. Then everything's fine.
Mother Superior.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually blame
Did something like this happen to you once?
Yes, it did actually.
Go on.
Funnily enough,
Yeah.
I was smuggled into somebody's house once. A male friend smuggled me into his house. It was the most horrible experience because you feel cheap and rotten that you can't be just, asked and invited in.
Well, maybe he was
properly.
embarrassed to be seen with you.
Well, that's the case still today, let me tell you. So I'm going to blame the parents because, I've got a son who's in his 20s and I know that you've got older boys, Pauline, and there's no way I would say to my son, never bring anybody back, don't make a noise, because I think that's just very unpleasant.
Well, they can come back, but just don't crouch behind the shower curtain like you're a psycho murderer.
Well, the reason she was crouching was because the son, Tim, didn't want his mother to know that he'd brought a woman back. I mean, what a big crime that is. So I blame the parents, actually, for being so narrow-minded.
Sister Carol. Oh, sorry, did you have more?
Well, I was going to say...
Okay, what?
You're completely forgiven, but I wouldn't forgive your mum and dad, actually.
Sister Caroline.
I agree. I too would forgive and forget, and who hasn't been in that situation before? Obviously not crouching behind a shower curtain, but hidden or smuggled into someone's house.
I think quite a lot of people. Tell us when were you
I've done the
last
smuggling.
When were you last smuggled into a house?
I've done the smuggling.
Who did you smuggle?
It was a young gentleman, although we had this barn at the bottom of our garden, and unfortunately he got stung several times by some wasps, having disturbed a wasp nest, so ended up in my parents' bedroom covered in wasps,
What, with
begging
your
for
parents?
forgiveness. Yes, they were in there.
All in the
Well,
bed together?
he was looking for the toilet to wash these wasps off.
You were trying to sneak him in, and actually in the process of sneaking him in, he got stung by hundreds of wasps, thus drawing attention to himself.
We found them in his socks the next day. It was most entertaining. Forgiven.
I would think so. It's Jan who sends in tonight's tale. Thank you, Jan. Dear Simon. Each night I listen to the confession section, and as I prepare the evening meal and peel the potatoes, I am reminded of my guilt over an incident in my younger days that I've never, ever told a soul. This was no incident that I found myself in. It was carefully calculated in my teenage mind and executed with what I can only describe as sheer brilliance. Because of the gravity of my sin, I wish only to be known by the nickname that my dad had for me as a child, which looks to me like Fanakapan. Not much of a nickname. Oh, is it?
I know that name.
My mother used to call me Fanny Fanakapan.
There we go. I wasn't going to mention the full name.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
What's the Fanakapan bit?
I have no idea. Fanny Fanakapan.
I don't know where it comes from either.
Okay.
East London girl, my mum.
It's a nickname that is actually longer than your actual name.
Well, yes. Yeah.
That's not saving much time. Anyway, Fanny Fanakapan. There's the thing. Okay. Let's hope that's quite broadcastable. Otherwise, you won't be on the show tomorrow.
She said it.
Anyway, Jan continues. My lovely dad, being the recipient of my dastardly deed, well, he was at the epicentre. My deed, as you'll hear, spreads like an earthquake. As a youngster, we had no national lottery. We relied on Dad doing the Pools coupon for our chance of the dream life. Every Thursday, the Pools boy would come and take the coupon away with Dad's Pools money, which he always left on the sideboard in the hallway. We were a typical working-class family, and money was always a little tight, so the Pools were our way to fame and fortune. Each Sunday morning, my dad would check his score drawers. But for younger listeners, ask your parents, or maybe your grandparents, as this does sound like a million years ago. Each Sunday morning, my dad would check his score drawers against the Sunday papers. He was never able to check them on a Saturday, as my mother always had some jobs for him to do. And by the time he'd done all those, we were gathered round the TV in time for the Generation Game. I often mused over the gifts on the conveyor belt and read the Green Shield stamp catalogue to get ideas on what felt-tip pens I could buy with my share of his winnings. Not how many 70s references we could get into one confession. Well, as I got older, my dad would allow me to fill out the ladies' coupon, score drawers chosen by my mum and I, and each week it went away with the Pools boy, and my payment was always with Dad's on the sideboard waiting. One week I was very late home after being out with an unsuitable young man. His car had broken down. A cliché, I know, but this time it really had. My dad wouldn't listen to my reasons and excuses and came down on the side of the woman doth protest too much and stopped me going out for the rest of the week. And also, get this, I would not be allowed to fill in my lady's coupon. Punishments were not something that my dad was very good at giving out, and I was even worse at receiving them. However, I bit my lip and resigned myself to a week of boring nights in front of the television. The pools boy came and went on the Thursday, and my lady's coupon stayed on the sideboard, blank and laughing at me. I felt angry at such an unjust punishment, especially on this one occasion. I was actually telling the truth. And that's when the idea started to form in my mind, an idea that for my young teenage years was sheer genius. And on the Saturday evening, I started to execute my wicked deed. As the score draws were being read out on the TV, I sat alone in the living room and filled out my lady's coupon, making sure, a phrase I hadn't heard before, but I enjoy saying, making sure that I added in enough score draws that would have meant a very, very substantial payout. I then put the coupon back on the sideboard. My plan was to, on the Sunday, get my dad to check my coupon, and when he saw what he could have won, to tell him the truth, and then we'd all laugh about it. So the next day, he sat with his Sunday paper, checking his pools, and I casually passed him my coupon and asked him to check it anyway, just for fun, and then I sat down, peering at his expression from behind my Jackie magazine, another gratuitous 70s reference. He checked and checked again, and then the colour drained from his face. Now, at this point, I expected him to say something, and then I would laugh and say, "Fooled ya!" and we'd laugh together. But he got up silently, went into the kitchen where my mum was cooking Sunday lunch. I heard muffled voices, and my mum gasped. Now, at this point, I had a choice. I could have ran into the kitchen shouting, "Ha ha, what a funny joke," or keep my head down. And I have to say I chose the latter. I hid behind my teen mag and I waited. My dad reappeared, totally deflated and lost for words. The day he could have won it all, but actually had won nothing. There was no spend for our family. The die was cast. There was no going back, no confession, no declaration of a joke, just my sanctimonious silence. I had won the battle, though not the pools. After that day, I was allowed to do the ladies' coupon and was revered as the daughter that could have won us $1 million. Family knew, friends knew, like I was a mini celebrity in our cul-de-sac. My dad died 8 years ago and went to his grave never knowing the truth, and I've carried the guilt of that fateful Black Saturday for over 30 years. So here I am asking for forgiveness, to be relieved of the burden of my guilt, to tell the truth and shame the devil. And that's from Jan. And now the most peculiar P.S. ever. P.S. Whilst I'm hoping to be forgiven, can I also add that I once told my dad that Glenn Miller had been found in the mountains living with apes. And there'd been a press blackout. My dad was so happy, he was looking forward to hearing some new Glenn Miller music. It's just so ridiculous, I just thought I'd include it. Anyway, it's a good 70s story from Jan. Let's see, or Fanny Fanakapan, as she appears to be known. I hope that's okay. Sister Pauline.
I used to do the pools with my dad too.
Really? Was it a big kind of father-daughter thing?
Yeah, well, it wasn't my household because nobody else could be bothered.
Did you fill in the ladies' coupon?
We didn't have a ladies' coupon, but I used to get my own line. Anyway, in relation to this confession, what a horrible, dreadful little bism. No, not forgiven. That's one of the worst things I have ever heard someone doing, ever.
Do you think?
Yeah. I think that's terrible. Truly, truly terrible.
But she was...
I did see it coming from quite a way off, I must admit. My head was in my hands thinking, please don't let it be that. That is just awful. And yeah, of course, she had the opportunity to fess up, and that moment passed. I dare say it was difficult to claw back, but what a nasty thing to do.
Mother Superior.
Yeah, I completely agree. Jan, what a horrible, horrible thing to do. You raised up this man's expectations, his hopes, his dreams. By the way, there were 3 of us children, and I think once our dad said to us, "Do you want to put your pocket money onto the pools?" Do they still do the pools, by the way? Is the pool still operating?
Yeah, you can.
I think it still does. And
yes, then.
My brother said they would, and I said no, I wouldn't, because I was mean. And anyway, they won. They won quite a lot of money.
I hope they excluded you.
No, well, they did, and I cried and stamped. and I think they ended up giving me 6 months or something. But anyway, I think this was a horrible thing to do, Jan. A horrible thing. I mean, your poor dad could have, had a heart attack or something from the shock of it.
Yeah, but he didn't.
No, I know, but the risk was there.
He was fine.
He was fine. Thank goodness. But no, you're definitely not forgiven. Definitely not.
Sister Caroline.
Hang on,
This is your last time.
He probably dined out on this for many a year, the day we could have won the pools.
Fortunately, he was still alive, yes.
And purely for Jan introducing us to the phrase "ladies' coupon," she is totally forgiven.
Yeah, I genuinely never heard of that.
Never
See,
heard
Pauline
of
was
it.
doing the pools, but you were just doing a line anyway.
Maybe that was just some nice phrase her lovely dad came up with to make it seem like her and her mum could be involved.
It will be a
her
title
lovely,
of a book.
innocent dad.
No, he loved it. He used to roll down the pub and say to his friends, "Oh, the day I could have won the pools."
Yeah, I'm sure he felt great about that.
I'm sure that would have been fabulous for
Well,
them.
it meant they bought the round.
Here we are with a drive time confession. We welcome Brother Paul, first time.
Evening.
Yes.
Evening.
Are you naturally a very forgiving type or a hardliner? Or
I'm probably known as a hardliner.
Bit of a hard
I like to take yeah. I don't forgive fools easily.
Okay, well, let's... won't last long on this show. That's for certain. Okay, this from CB sends in tonight's tale. CB, thank you very much indeed for this. Dear Simon and your...
Start again!
Dear Simon and your munificent enclave.
Oh, I understand now.
No one's described it thus before. My confession seeks to divest my conscience of a burden kept for over 25 years. A weight on my mind that wakes me up on occasion with its knives of guilt pricking my very soul. An encumbrance born of okay, we get the picture. Of a misjudged attempt to do a worthy deed. Back in the sunnier days of selective recollection, my dog and I would spend hours in the nearby wood, chasing sticks and squirrels, paddling in the stream, running like an idiot, snuffling through the leaves. And sometimes my dog joined in too. Funny how. The sunlight falling through the leafy trees in small patches of colour on the ground, the song of unseen birds voicing their unabashed joy of life, the earthy scent of Mother Nature.
Get on with it!
Mingled with the intermittent perfume of wildflowers. Oh, my goodness me. Small groups of families enjoying a rustic picnic, and a loud moo of a cow that seemed to be coming from, well, just over there. To be honest, the sound of cows wasn't that unusual, since the wood was bordered by farmland, but it was strange to hear one so loud from where we were.
Oh.
It was a little bit like that.
Be quiet, Pauline.
Very good. Splendid atmosphere in the studio already. Sure enough, after following... yes, anyway, so to be honest, it wasn't rare to have the sound of cows, but it was particularly close. Sure enough, after following the sound, we found not one but several cows wandering the wood. Small inspection of the surrounding area showed that the dry stone wall, which usually confined the beasts to their field, had collapsed at one point, and the bored bovines had decided to go exploring. It was at this point my instinct for doing good kicked in, and I hatched a plan to return the cows to their field, replace some of the stones back into the wall, and make it secure, and then let the farmer know that a proper repair was needed. In hindsight, I suppose I really should just have told the farmer. Sam, my dog, was the city-dwelling offspring of a working sheepdog. In fact, his whole family were working dogs, and since we knew the owners of his brother and his mother, we regularly visited them on their farms and watched them do what border collies do best, round things up. On our trips to the wood, I had often practiced the commands that I'd seen real shepherds use, and was happy that Sam understood and responded to my "away, away," and "come by" commands, and sometimes "lie down" as well. Doesn't sound very rustic at all. "Sam, stay," I said as I positioned him and myself in a good starting position to start herding the cows back into their field. I walked to one side, holding my arms wide to make myself look bigger, and instructed Sam to go the opposite way, and then we both closed in on the herd. Come by, away, away, lie down, blimey." Oh no, lie down. Blimey, this was going really well. I don't think blimey is an instruction to the dog. "The cows are moving in the direction that I want them to. Sam is being as good as gold and doing exactly what he's told. Life is good." Slowly we grouped the cows together into a small huddle, and were leading them towards the gap in the wall through which they had ventured. I was loving this. It was all going so well. We had them within a few feet of the wall, so it was time to slow things down and carefully guide them through the gap. I silently did a loud woohoo in my head as the first cow picked its way through the fallen stones and returned to the green pasture. My commands to Sam were quieter now. He knew what he was doing and didn't need me shouting orders at him. The concentration on his face was amazing. His head was low, crouching along the ground, going left and right, eyes fixed on the herd, ears pricked, and then he saw the squirrel. Woof, he barked. I'm not going to do the impressions, as you know, I don't really do them very well. As he ran at full pelt to the tree next to the broken wall, up which his favourite game was now escaping. Moo, chorused... Oh, hang on. Chorused the cows as he darted between their feet. Thanks. Sam! I shouted, but it was too late. The large, previously docile animals who had until recently been enjoying their adventure into the unknown were now scared. Their eyes wide in this unfamiliar place, a barking dog and a shouting man. What should they do? What was the only thing that they could do? Well, they ran. All 18 of them. They ran and they ran. They stampeded into the woods, their hooves beating out a thunderous rhythm through the trees. Here he goes again. In a scene reminiscent of a stampede from an old Western movie. The picnicking families turned and fled, many screams filling the air. This turned out to be a wise move, as some of their eating area was trampled into oblivion. Food and drink lay scattered, children sobbed, and I hid. Simon, Mother Superior, Sister Whoever, and Brother What's-It. You are the first people in the entire world to whom I've related this tale. I don't believe that for a minute. I can't begin to guess how long it took the farmer to retrieve his livestock from the large rambling acres of woodland and return them to his field, and it is this for which I'm seeking forgiveness. Also, too, from the many shrieking and screaming picnickers and their traumatised children. I never continued with Sam's sheepdog training and never again tried to round up anything other than our toddling daughter whenever we took her for a walk in the park or woods. Well, you never know what might come of running out of the trees. Yours, apologetically, CB, Flowery CB, who likes a word or two. And has a nice turn of phrase. Sister Pauline is going to speak first.
Well, they are called sheepdogs for a reason. Dogs aren't generally used in order to herd cows. Cows are skittish. And quite frankly, on his own, he could have done it. But then how is he to know? He says it was 25 years ago, but doesn't say how old he was. So we have no idea whether he was 7 or 27.
That's very true.
But I would say you're completely forgiven. It was and good intentions were certainly there, although I do suspect he rather wanted to try out the dog's skills rather than help the farmer. He just wanted to give it a try.
Do you think he's a little bit of a show-off, masquerading behind a good deed, maybe?
Possibly. But I'll forgive him anyway, because obviously it wasn't an intentional outcome, and I bet it was hilarious.
What, seeing everyone running away from a stampeding herd? Let's try Mother Superior.
Well, I can understand why he did it. I mean, if I'd have been in his position and I had a little sheepdog to hand, I would have probably thought I know it's a sheepdog, but, you know, maybe that they're just good with all animals, because if you're not, you know, in that world, you don't know. So I think I would have done the same thing and thought, well, let's try and get them back. And
I don't think anyone would have tried to do the same thing.
Well, I would.
I know, I fancy a go at herding cows.
No, I would have done that. Yeah, no, I seriously would have done. You don't believe me, but no. I would have done. Well, it depends how many there were, actually. I wonder how many.
18.
How many is that what he said? 18.
That's what I just read out.
Well, sorry, I wasn't listening.
No,
I think I couldn't get into the story. It was too flowery, the description of me. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I will forgive you because I would have done the same thing, and it wasn't your fault that the sheepdog ran after a squirrel.
To the extent that you were paying attention at all. Brother Paul, here he comes.
I'm in agreement with Sister Pauline. It's a sheepdog, not a cow dog. I haven't seen many editions of One Man and Their Dog, but I don't remember an episode where they herded cows. And why would you... the film City Slickers springs to mind. Urban dwellers trying out country-style folk things.
Yes.
It's not for people who live in cities. Why have a go? And there's 18 cows. A couple of cows, 3 or 4 cows, fair enough.
Oh, blimey, we've got another match.
Much wisdom there. And here endeth another Confessions podcast. Who do you forgive? More of those next week. Do join us if you can. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this BBC Radio 2 free download. Now, why not try more?
Jazz for me, I guess, is improvisation.
My pick of the best in rhythm and blues.
Music from Richard Thompson, Chris Wood and Pentangle, amongst many, many others.
All at the BBC Radio 2 website.